I'm going to update the music on that intro at some point. How's it going, guys? I'm excited. We're getting into another episode of Heidegger. I had to like almost kick myself into motivation on these, and that's just me having these tiny little spite cells in my heart that are just like, God, look how many subs you have. Why do you bother? Zerilath, who gives a fuck? Who cares? Nobody fucking cares about your mind and your gods and your understanding of time and space and reality. Nobody gives a fuck. Who cares? I could have read that. Look at you. You used to be so fat. Fuck you. Right? That's these are all the fucking, demons talking down to me in my head that I have to fucking argue with before I go fucking live. Straight up, because I also am listening to the angels, or trying to ignore the angels that are telling me to put a shirt on, because fuck you, look how fat I used to be, right? But I would have possibly done this just being a fat guy with no shirt on. So now I don't know, am I doing it because I'm showing off, or am I doing it because I don't care? Because if I'm showing off, it inherently means that I care. Let's face it, I'm showing off. So it's definitely not because I don't care. But honestly, I'm making the excuse that I'm owning the ethos that it's okay for a good-looking man to take his shirt off in public. That's supposed to be always okay. Why? Because maybe I don't like fat-shaming people, but if I take my shirt off, it's like I'm fat-shaming them. Because I'm just like, look, I don't have to say anything. Could you just look? Could you just look and fucking understand that I was you 2 years ago and I earned this? And I never thought that I couldn't. I just was choosing not to. Because I let all of my life get in the way. But the pandemic killed me. In other words, I had an existential crisis, and I had an entire shift in my Dasein, which is the subject matter of Heidegger here. So people like Heidegger can be significant to someone whose head had to get cracked open by a devastating, shocking world change that looked entirely like an absurdist drama to the people that also said this is a catastrophic world change, but they went with it. And it was the fact that they went with it is what made it a catastrophic world change for me. It's like this is the fucking billionth fucking virus crisis that the media has ever fucking thrown at anybody for any fucking reason other than to fucking get them in. And that is not supposed to be an insult, but they made sure to make that an insult. Right? I can tell that me running around talking about how I fucking changed my behavior, my entire physiology changed. Not just I gained muscles and could move faster and all the fucking cool stuff that comes with having an athletic fucking body. But I'll be goddamn if my entire state of internal feelings from the physical internal expression of it, right? Part of the reason why negative speech like the ones I was just telling you about is this big drain on your world, your world, and thus on you and how you express out of it. It's just doing things like keeping your heart rate and your breath rate at a certain resonance. Heart and breath, specifically. Right? Which is why pranic breathing is amazing, because of what it does to the heart. And what it does to the heart is what it does to the blood oxygenization process that is happening to every cell in your body, including your gut and your brain. Using the pranic breathing is an excellent way to cycle oxygenated blood into every fiber of your existent being. This is what I enjoy about it. It almost feels like the New Age catch-all, like I run around, I feel like a New Age idiot, but it's such a conviction in me anyway. It's just like, have you tried pranic breathing? Right? It should be a meme that's making fun of me. Have you tried pranic breathing? Like, because I mention it whenever I just, like, people really have fucking breathing problems. Like, you know, the mouth, it's not just even being a mouth breather, right? It's your, you know, people are choosing to have a panicked relationship with life. Panicked. Even when they're calm. Their heart is ready to flinch. And this is a drug for your reptilian brain, which then starts acting badly, and then everybody starts freaking out about reptilian shapeshifters, when it's really just you freaking out and confusing yourself with everybody else that scares you because you're weak. And this changes your relationship with conspiracy theories that have shaped your mind in such a way. And so I read books like this to teach you how to get out of your fucking head, like me. So that meme looks cooler and cooler and cooler every day that you see me, as you can't believe that's the same fucking guy looking like the other Thor. And this is an accomplishment with my life that I don't need to fucking become monetarily successful because I am doing or whatever. It's just so much fucking fun, and I'm doing things on social media. And I look like a rock star now, as opposed to just a fat guy who wished he looked like a rock star. Do I sound like a rock star? I don't know. The struggles with the guitar are real. But they would have been real anyway. But it's not like I don't have a history. Anyway, I felt like that rant was really, really fucking important. So, let's not waste any more time rocking the hide. How we doing over here? Ah, Blue Kachina's here. What's up, Blue? And why are you not a moderator? There you go. Boom. You are moderable. Could have sworn, I like, is this your first time in the chat room? It's like, man, okay. So, I should be right here at 19. The definition of the world as res extensa. Descartes distinguished the ego cogito from the res corporea. This distinction will thereafter be determinative ontologically for the distinction between nature and spirit. Okay, nature and spirit. So, nature, I'm assuming, is for corporea, which would be corporeal, my understanding, right? Like, my physical body is the corporeal manifestation of my soul, versus a spiritual, which I believe is what he's going to means by res extensa. So, you know what? Let me copy, paste, res extensa, hold on a second. Okay, philosophy stack exchange. Descartes introduced res cogitans and res extensa, which is generally translated as thinking substance and extended substance. Okay, that makes sense. But it's the notion of substance by which dependence is not an possibility. Thus, from here, directly, we have mind-body dualism in the sense of being entirely distinct and without effect on each other. Okay, there we go. Okay. So he's talking about the spirit of the mind. Yes, it's the spirit of the mind versus you and your natural physical relationship with the world. That basically is what we're talking about, which is what I thought he was talking about. I just had to make sure that I understood the language. Okay. No matter with how many variations of content, the opposition between nature and spirit may get set up ontically its ontological foundation, and indeed the very poles of this opposition remain unclarified, meaning that it's hard to tell the difference in the nuance. It's only in the extremes that you even can categorize, which... Yeah, this is true. I would say that gets dumped into the subconscious, right? And there's also a lot that gets dumped in the unconscious, right? Because the subconscious is the dumping ground for things we understand that we don't have the power to remember right now, such as, like a thought I was having 15 minutes ago is oblivious to me because if I go to think about that, I'm distracting myself from my process in real time here, right? And I'm only bringing it up at all as a personal point of example that you can observe in real time, reflect upon how that is working in your mind itself. And being able to have control of your thoughts in such ways is going to help you in your in all your intuitive practices. Divination, invocations, so on and so forth. All right, where was I? Foundations. I could have sworn I didn't read past that word. Okay. Nature and spirit may get set up ontically in ontological foundations, and indeed the very poles of this opposition remain unclarified. This unclarity has its proximate Naschte roots in Descartes' distinction. What kind of understanding of being does he have when he defines the being of these entities? The terms for the being of an entity that is in itself a substantia. Sometimes this expression means the being of an entity as substance, substantiality. At other times, it means the entity itself, a substance. That substantia is used in these two ways is not accidental. This already holds for the ancient conception of this particular term. I think that was the logos. I think that was the word for logos. I forget already now. But it's whatever this word here is that I just highlighted. Which, you know what? Why not? Let's do this one. Let's do this one. Can I get a copy? Copy. Thank you. Where are we? Did I close it? No. Here we go. Paste. There's a function of Palatine is a little thing that hangs off the... No, not the... No, it didn't work. It translated it into its closest English language thing. It didn't recognize it. Oh well. To determine the nature of the res corpora, ontologically, we must explicate the substance of this entity as a substance. That is, its substantiality. What makes up the authentic being in itself? The an im selbst, the an im selbst Sinn of the res corpora. That sounds, that's almost like anim, like anima, like animism. The anim selbsten. Makes me wonder about anim and what that means. But anyway, of the res corporea. How is it at all possible to grasp a substance as such, that is, to grasp it substantiality? Then here I'm going to speak some Latin. Et quidem exquilibet attributos substantia cognoscitur, sed una tamen est quisque substantiae precipua proprietas qua ipsius naturam essentiamque constituit et ad cum elae omnes referuntur. Substances become accessible in their attributes. I don't know if this is the translation of what we just read, but it is in quotations. Substance becomes accessible in their attributes, and every substance has some distinctive property from which the essence of the substantiality of that definite substance can be read of. Which property is this in the case of the res corporea? Nempe extensia in longum latum et profundum substantiae corporea naturam constituit. Extension, namely in length, breadth, and thickness, makes up the real being of that corporeal substance which we call the world. What gives the extensio this distinctive status? Nem omne aliud quod corpore tribue protest extensionem presupponit. Extension is a state of being constitutive for the entity we are talking about. It is that, hold on a second, that Descartes distinguishes the ego cogito from the res corporea. This distinction will therefore be determinative ontologically for the distinction between nature and spirit. Now, hang on a second while I'm sorry, that jumped up instead of down, and I wanted to actually read this. For annotation 1, which I missed it, but this portion of Being in Time has never been published. Okay, so he wants to make a note that that particular section was not published. As in, was there a German version? Was this taken from private notes and then added? Where is this particular piece? Because that's very good to know. It might be up here. It's up here from the end of this. The end of 18. Okay. So I may have covered that in the last segment. Anyway. So, I'm sorry. Let's get that sentence to make sense. Okay. Extension is a state of being constitutive for the entity we are talking about. It is that which must already be before any other ways in which being is determined, so that these can be what they are. Extension must be assigned, Zugweisen, primarily to the corporeal thing. The world's extension and substantiality, which itself is characterized by extension, are accordingly demonstrated by showing how all the other characteristics which the substance definitively possesses, especially divisio figura motus, can be conceived only as modi of extension, while on the other hand, extensio sine figura vel motu remains quite intelligible. Now, I find that interesting that we have the word here is modi. Modi is one of Thor's sons. Magnus, Modi, and Thrud. Thrud being his daughter. Magnus and Modi, I think, are actually half brothers because one of them, the mother is Jarnaxa, as I understand it, right? So Thor's got a little bit of a two wives, a wife and then a child from the, from another tribe, if you will, right? Hey, there's Slick. What's up, Slick? Anyway, if you missed the beginning, get a chance to hear the beginning later on. I do quite the thing for 10 minutes. It's pretty profound, and I reference a little bit of what we talked about. Anyway. Thus, a corporeal thing that maintains its total extension can still undergo many changes in the ways in which that extension is distributed in the various dimensions and can present itself in manifold shapes as one and the same thing. Kelly, hail. Kelly, where do I know you? Are you Kelly Burkana? You're not, no. No, that's Kaylee. Kelly, do I know you? Kelly Boyles sounds vaguely familiar. And Kaylee Burkana, I forget her channel, but she's cool. Check her out. Anyway. One of the same thing. At cu inum et idam corpus retinendo suam iendam quantitatem pluribus diversis modus protest. There's protest right there. Extendi nunc silicit magis secundum longitudinum minusc secundum latitudinum vel profunditatem ac polo post e contra magis secundum latitudinum et minus secundum longitudinem. Yes. The answer is yes. Could you be more specific? Maybe you've messaged me on the phone. Where am I live again? Is he really? What? Just click on the link. Hold on a second. I have to answer this one. Oh my gosh. Why is it not there? Ridiculous. Okay. Profile. Should be right there. Yeah, bro. Just, oh my god. How do I forward this? Copy link. All right. For some reason, the Occult Rejects, Nick in particular, has forgotten how to use X and doesn't know how to click on a link to come check out the show. Anyway. Oh my gosh. All right. Anywho. Shape is a modus of extensio, and so is motion. For motus is grasped only si de nullo nisi locale cogitamus ac de vi a quo exitator non inquerimus. If the motion is a property of the res corpora, and the property which is then, in order for it to be experienceable in its being, it must be conceived in terms of the being of this entity itself, in terms of extensio. This means that it must be conceived as mere change of location, so nothing like force counts for anything in determining what the being of this entity is. Matter may have such definite characteristics as hardness, weight, and color. Durities, pundus, color. But these can all be taken away from it, and it still remains what it is. These do not go to make up its real being, and insofar as they are, they turn out to be modes of extensio. Descartes tries to show this in detail with regard to hardness. All right, here's some more Latin for me. Hang on a second. I'm going to take a sip on this one. Namquantum ad duritiam nihil allod de illa sensus nobis indicat quam partes duorum corporum resister motor manum nostrarum, cum in illas incurrency enim cotisconco manus nostrae versus alecum partem moventur corporea omnia ibi existentia resident idem seret qua illa accident nullum unquam duritam sentermos nec ullo modo potest intelligi corporea qua si residerent id circo naturam corpus es a misura nec proand ipsa in durite consistit. Woo! All right, I think I'm ready to do mass now. Hardness is experienced when one feels one's way to touch. Tasten. What does the sense of touch tell us about it? The parts of the hard thing resist. A movement of the hand, such as an attempt to push it away. If, however, hard bodies, those which do not give way, should change their location with the same velocity as that of the hand which strikes at them, nothing would ever get touched. Berühren. And hardness would not be experienced and would accordingly never be. But it is quite incomprehensible that bodies which give way this such velocity should thus forfeit any of their corporeal being. If they retain this, even under a change in velocity, which makes it impossible for anything like hardness to be, then hardness does not belong to the being of entities of this sort. Edamque ration ostendi potest et pondus et colorum et elias omnis osmodi qualitates qua in materia corporea sentintur exia tolle posse ipsa integra remnant unda sequitur a nulla ex illis eos naturum dupender. Anyway, thus, what makes up the being of the res corpora is the extensio, that which is omnimodo divisible, figurabile et mobile, that which can change itself by being divided, shaped, or moved in any way, that which is capex mutatonum, that which maintains itself, rimanet. Through all these changes in any corporeal thing, the real entity is what is suited for thus remaining constant. Standigen verb lib. So much so, indeed, that this is how the substantiality of such a substance gets characterized. All right. This is perfect. It's been about half an hour. I'm gonna play some music, and then we're gonna sink our teeth into number 20. All right. So I have the selection queued up. Yeah. All right. We'll be right back in about 5.5 minutes. Hey, there we go. Perfect. Boom. Bang. We're back. Let me see here. I'm just doing some setup. Let's see. I can go. It's only a minute. Next one. All right. Just setting up, just in case we're going to be here for more than another half an hour. Setting up the next song. All right. So we're gonna get ourselves going here on part 20. Boom. Let's see. All set. And yeah. So Kelly, forget because I don't think I probably just know you by whatever name you're using, and I just don't know. Have I been forgetting that there's someone who just goes by Kelly on the Weave? I mean, I'm there a lot of those Saturdays, a lot of them, right? So I'm assuming you're either Crone or Godpill Angel. No, I don't think you're Godpill Angel. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure it's not Kelly. But anyway, thanks for tuning in. Where do you find the weaving spiders? Oh, you don't know how to get to the weave? Oh my God! Could somebody link the weave for me? Because I got to get reading on this thing. Somebody in chat send Blue Kachina a link to the weave. Send them the last episode and maybe even timestamp it where I come in, just so she knows how long she has to wait through the very awesome guest who is reinventing the annual calendar, and he's really effing good at it. I'm impressed. But anyway, Let me see. Oh, I gotta realign this a little bit. All right, there we'll do it. Excellent. Foundations of the ontological definition of the world. Substantiality is the idea of being to which the ontological characterization of the res extensa harks back per substantiam nihil aliud intelligere possimus quam rem qua ita exista ut nulla alia reindigata ad existendum. Thank you, Slick. By substance, we can understand nothing else than an entity which is in such a way that it needs no other entity in order to be. The being of a substance is characterized by not needing anything, that whose being is such that it has no need at all for any other entities. Any other entity satisfies the idea of substance in the authentic sense. Excuse me. This entity is the ens perfectissim substantia qua nulla plen reindigat unica tantum potesti intelligi nempe Deus. Here, God is a purely ontological term, if it is to be understood as ens perfectissimum. At the same time, the self-evident connotation of the concept of God is such as to permit an ontological interpretation for the characteristic of not needing anything, a constitutive item in substantiality, alias vero omnis non nisi up consensus de exister posse percipimus. All entities other than God need to be produced in the widest sense and also to be sustained. Being is to be understood within a horizon which ranges from the production of what is to be present at hand to something which has no need of being produced. Every entity which is not God is an ens creatum. The being which belongs to one of these entities is infinitely different from that which belongs to the other. Yet we still consider creation and creator alike as entities. We are thus using being in so wide a sense that its meaning embraces an infinite difference. So even created entities can be called substance, with some right. Relative to God, of course, these entities need to be produced and sustained. But within the realm of created entities, the world, in the sense of ens creatum, there are things which are in need of no other entity. Relatively to the creaturely production and sustentation that we find. For instance, in man, of these substances, there are two kinds, the res cogitans and the res extensa, right? So, this all gets very, very interesting when you're trying to kind of like separate the not you from the you, but then there's all of that other stuff that, you may feel at the present moment, like, oh, I feel the presence of God, right? And how would I know the presence of God between just feeling good because of the blue flicker on my screen? or how comfortably I sit in this chair, and then I'm just blowing that physical feeling way out of proportion. Yes, indeed. Oh, okay, so I was right, Kelly, you're crone? Is that right? I need to. Yeah. Can't believe how long it's taken me to, you know, get an answer. It's all right. I'm being weird. It's mostly because I'm asking myself, do I know you well enough to give you a wrench? Do you want a wrench because you are crone? You wouldn't be lying to me now, are you? Let's see. The being of that substance whose distinctive proprietas is presented by extensio, thus becomes definable in principle ontologically if we clear the meaning of being, which is common to the three kinds of substances, one of them infinite, the other both finite, but nomen substantiae non convenit Dio et illis univos ut disi sole in scholis hox est qua Deo et creatoris sit communis. Communis sounds like communist. Here, Descartes touches upon a problem with which medieval ontology was often buried. The question of how the signification of being signifies any entity which one may on occasion be considering. In the assertions God is and the world is, we assert being. This world is, however, cannot be meant to apply to these entities in the same sense, which are the two Greek terms over here, or one's Greek, one might be Latin, because it's univos. When between them there is an infinite difference of being. If the signification of is were univocal or univocal, then what is created would be viewed as if it were uncreated, or the uncreated would be reduced to the status of something created. But neither does. Being functions as a mere name which is the same in both cases. In both cases, being is understood. This positive sense in which being signifies is one which the schoolmen took as a signification by analogy, as distinguished from one which is univocal or merely homonymous. No, I was right the first time. Homonymous. That's homina. I just had an excuse to say homina on my live stream. That's great. But anyway, taking their departure from Aristotle, in which this problem is foreshadowed in prototypical form, just as at the very outset of Greek ontology. They established various kinds of analogy, so that even the schools have different ways of taking the signification function of being. In working out this problem ontologically, Descartes is always far behind the schoolmen. Indeed, he evades the question. Nulla es substanti nominis significo potest distincta intelligi, quad Deo et creatris sit communis. This evasion is tantamount to his failing to discuss the meaning of being, which the idea of substantiality embraces, or the character of the universality which belongs to this signification. Of course, even the ontology of the medievals has gone no further than that of the ancients inquiring into what being itself may mean. So, it is not surprising if no headway is made with a question like that of the way in which being signifies, as long as this has to be discussed on the basis of an unclarified meaning of being, which this signification expresses. The meaning remains unclarified because it is held to be self-evident. Descartes not only evades the ontological question of substantiality altogether, he also emphasizes explicitly that substance as such, that is to say, its substantiality, is in and for inaccessible from the outset, or vorgangig. Veren tamen non potes substantia primum animadverti ex hoc solo quod ritres existens qua hoc solum per se nos non afficit. Being itself does not affect us, and therefore cannot be perceived. Being is not a real predicate, says Kant. Hey, Telling Stewart is here. Let me see. And we have annotation notes. Okay. Yeah. Okay, it's just the reference point for Kant, Critique of Pure Reason, Transcendental Dialectic, chapters 3, section 4. All right, and then the other two annotations I don't have to read because it's just German clarification. Who is merely repeating Descartes' principle? Thus, the possibility of a pure problematic of being gets renounced in principle, and a way is sought for arriving at those definite characteristics of substance which we have designated above. Because being is not in fact accessible as an entity. It is expressed through attributes, definite characteristics of the entities under consideration, characteristics which themselves are. Being is not expressed through just any such characteristics, but rather through those satisfying in the purest manner that meaning of being and substantiality, which has still been tacitly presupposed to the substantia finita as res corporea. What must primarily be assigned, or zuhuesung, is the extentio, quin et facilos intelligimus substantiam extensum vel substantiam cogitantem quam substantiam solum omisso io quod cogitet vel sit extensa. For substantiality is detachable ration tantum. It is not detachable realiter, nor can we come across it in the way in which we come across those entities themselves, which are substantially. Thus, the ontological grounds for defining the world as res extensa have been made plain. They lie in the idea of substantiality, which not only remains unclarified in the meaning of its being, but gets passed off as something incapable of clarification, and gets represented indirectly by way of whatever substance properly belongs most preeminently to the particular substance. Moreover, in this way of defining a substance through some substantial entity lies the reason why the term substance is used in two ways. What is here intended is substantiality, and it gets understood in terms of a characteristic of substance, a characteristic which is itself an entity, because something ontical is made to underlie the ontological. The expression, or substantia, functions sometimes with a signification which is ontological, sometimes with one which is ontical, but mostly with one which is hazily ontico-ontological, because this slight difference of signification, however, there lies hidden a failure to master the basic problem of being. To treat this adequately, we must track down the equivocations in the right way. He who attempts this sort of thing does not just busy himself with merely verbal significations. He must venture forward into the most primordial problematic of the things themselves to get such nuances straightened out. And oh wow, that was 20. Look at that. So we've done two. Now, how long is 21? Let's find out how long 21 is. couple of pages here. It's what? It's 6 o'clock? All right. I'm not going to cop out at an hour on you. In fact, yeah, because right here we can get into section C, which is still 21? Okay. And then there we are down here at 135. Okay. That works. Okay. Hang on. Scroll it up a pinch. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna do that because I've only been this segment's only been about 15 minutes or so thus far, just because we aren't doing these intrinsically on the half hour, just because of introduction time plus music offsets everything, and I'm not trying that hard to constrain all the things. And a wrench would be nice. Okay, there you go. Alrighty. The hermeneutical discussion of the Cartesian ontology of the world. All right, so here's so here we're gonna get right into a dissection of Cartesian world. And now remember, like I've said, and this is my added gnosis, I don't think Heidegger doesn't seem to be interested in steering off course from his sources, and despite Old Norse being, probably similar to Old German or High German, perhaps, with the whole where all the thing, which I've been talking about nearly every episode, right? So world, thus far, all these other meanings of the word world are all lining up properly. Let's see if this definition of the world is the same, right? Because Cartesian ontology is a different is a different animal, but it's the familiar animal of most people operating in the world, because a lot of them are operating in the world through this kind of more substantive functionality, and don't quite let their heads get unraveled in the metaphysics of it all. The critical question now arises: does this ontology of the world seek the phenomenon of the world at all? And if not, does it at least define some entity within the world fully enough so that the worldly character of this entity can be made visible in it? To both questions we must answer no. The entity which Descartes is trying to grasp ontologically and in principle with his extensio is rather such as to become discoverable, first of all, by going through an entity within the world, which is, hold on a second, within the world, which is proximately ready to hand, nature. Though this is the case, and though any ontological characterization of this latter entity within the world may lead us into obscurity, even if we consider both the idea of substantiality and the meaning of the existit and the ad existendum, which have been brought into the definition of that idea, it still remains possible that though an ontology based upon a radical separation of God, the I, and the world, the ontological problem of the world will in some sense get formulated and further advanced. If, however, this is not possible, we must then demonstrate explicitly not only that Descartes' conception of the world is ontologically defective, but that his interpretation and the foundation on which it is based have led him to pass over both the phenomenon of the world and the being of those entities within the world which are proximally ready to hand. In our exposition of the problem of worldhood, we suggested the importance of obtaining proper access to this phenomenon. So in criticizing the Cartesian point of departure, we must ask which kind of being that belongs to Dasein we should fix upon as giving us an appropriate way of being to those entities with whose being an extensio Descartes equates the being of the world. The only genuine access to them lies in the knowing, the erkennen, the intellectio, in the sense of the kind of knowledge, erkenntnis, we get in mathematics and physics. Mathematical knowledge is regarded by Descartes as the one manner of apprehending entities which can always give assurance that their being has been securely grasped. If anything measures up in its own kind of being to the being that is accessible in mathematical knowledge, then it is the authentic sense. Such entities are those which always are what they are. Accordingly, that which can be shown to have the character of something that constantly remains as remanens capax mutationem makes up the real being of those entities of the world which get experienced. That which enduringly remains really is. This is the sort of thing which mathematics knows. That which is accessible in an entity through mathematics makes up its being. Thus the being of the world is, as it were, dictated to it in terms of a definite idea of being which lies veiled in the concept of substantiality. Toward Herkimer meter shows split in a dilemma two-headed occurs in October under Hercules. Interesting. And in terms of the idea of a knowledge by which such entities are cognized, the kind of being which belongs to entities within the world is something which they themselves might have been permitted to present. But Descartes does not let them do so. Let's take a look. All right, don't have to read that. Instead, he prescribes for the world its real being, as it were, on the basis of an idea of being whose source has not been unveiled and which has not been demonstrated in its own right, an idea in which being is equated with constant presence at hand. Thus, his ontology of the world is not primarily determined by his leanings towards mathematics, a science which he chances to esteem very highly, but rather by his ontological orientation in principle towards being as constant, presence at hand, which mathematical knowledge is exceptionally well suited to grasp. In this way, Descartes explicitly switches over philosophically from the development of traditional ontology to modern mathematical physics and its transcendental foundation. Right, even the cogito ergo sum, the statement is a mathematical statement. It is saying that there is a quantitative value to who you are that is directly proportionate to how you measure your, how much you think, right? And I haven't read enough Descartes to know exactly what he means by how much you think, right? Are we talking about the difference between me and an NPC, or are we just talking about NPCs don't think at all? Which, no, they do. They don't think about anything that matters at hand, basically, right? That's the problem with the NPC is that so many of the things they ought to be concerned about are inverted. That you realize that their thinking patterns are empty compared to yours. Anyway. The problem of how to get appropriate access to entities within the world is one which Descartes feels no need to raise. Under the unbroken ascendance of the traditional ontology, the way to get a genuine grasp of what really is, des Eigentlichsein seienden, has been decided in advance. It lies in that term that we don't have translated, beholding in the widest sense. Der Anschauung im weitesten Sinn. This term, which I guess is thinking, is just a more fully achieved form of the other term, beholding versus thinking. Yeah. That makes sense. Like, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? And so your mind will automatically process, all the aesthetically things I see, I like it. And then your brain says you like it, right? You get a sense of you like it, and then you think to yourself you like it because you're just coming up with the word for the feeling in your head, for the pleasure upon looking at the thing that is beheld to you, right? It's present at hand. So anyway, and then thinking is when you think about it. Oh, it's because of the way their hair is set. It's their figure. It's the cute birthmark. It's the way she moves. You start getting into the details of what you're beholding. You start meditating on the details of what you're beholding, then you go to thinking. And that would be the easiest way I could explain what I say that he means, that beholding is a wider sense and thinking is a more fully achieved form of it. And in fact, you can't have thinking without beholding first. Sensatio, as opposed to intellectio, still remains possible as a way of access to entities by a beholding which is perceptual in character. But Descartes presents his critique of it because he is oriented ontologically by these principles. Descartes knows very well what entities do not proximally show themselves in their real being. What is proximally given is this waxen thing, which is colored, flavored, hard, and cold in definite ways, and which gives off its own special sound when struck. But this is not of any importance ontologically, nor in general is anything which is given through the senses. Satis erit si advertamus sensum perceptamus non refere nisi ad istum corporis humani cum ante conjunctionem et nobis quidem ordiner exhiber quid ad illam externa corpora prodes possint otnosir. The senses do not enable us to cognize any entity in its being. They merely serve to announce the way in which external things within the world are useful or harmful for human creatures encumbered with bodies. Non nos docir qualia corpora in sepsis existant. They tell us nothing about entities in their being. Quod agentes percipimus naturam materiae save corporis in universum spectati non consister in io quod sit res dura vel pondorosa vel culrata vel aleo aliqua modus sensus afficiens, sed tantum in io quod sit res extensa in longum letum et profundum. I hope I got that all right. All right. And right there at the end of all that Latin, I feel like taking another short break. So, got some more Gojira. Gojira is such a different band. They're French, but like they almost like fit in with like American nu metal, almost. But but it's just like they do what American nu metal does, but then they add like blast beats, and it's just like American, like a lot of American bands like that got big back in the day were not blast beaten bands. Right? It's just like, Korn didn't do like blast beats. Korn did like hip hop beats. Deftones, hip hop beats, right? Like 'cause that was part of what made nu metal, right? There's something that's a little bit on that nu metal vibe because of the guitarist, and even the vocals kind of hit like that. But yeah. Anyway, that's France, and I'm French enough to want to play them. But anyway. All right, let's see right here. Oh, wrong one. No. That's what I wanted. There we go. All right. That's too short. Next one. All right, that's what? Track 6? Yes. All right, good. All right. So we're right here at the top of the paragraph. Let me make sure everything's lined up. All right, that's good enough. Okay. Gojira ergo sum. Anyway, if we subject Descartes' interpretation of the experience of hardness and resistance to a critical analysis, it will be plain how unable he is to let what shows itself in sensation present itself in its own kind of being, or even to determine its character. All right, don't have to read it. Whoops. Hardness gets taken as resistance, but neither hardness nor resistance is understood in a phenomenal sense, as something experienced in itself whose nature can be determined in such an experience. For Descartes, resistance amounts to no more than not yielding place, that is, not undergoing any change of location. So if a thing resists, this means that it says in a definite location it stays in a definite location relatively to some other thing which is changing its location, or that it is changing its own location with a velocity which permits the other thing to catch up with it. But when the experience of hardness is interpreted this way, the kind of being which belongs to sensory perception is obliterated, and so is any possibility that the entities encountered in such perception should be grasped in their being. Descartes takes the kind of being which belongs to the perception of something and translates it into the only kind he knows. The perception of something becomes a definite way of being present at hand side by side, or to res extensa, which are present at hand. The way in which their movements are related is itself a mode of that extensio, but which the presence at hand of the corporeal thing is primarily characterized. Of course, no behavior in which one feels one's way by touch, eins testanden Verhaltens, can be completed, unless what can thus be felt, des Betastbaren, has closeness of a very special kind. But this does not mean that touching, Berührung, and the hardness. Well, we got Dissident Jones and Slick Dissident here. What up? Got the two dissidents. Are you cognitive? Are my dissonances cognitive today? Anyway, all right, enough of that. All right, can be completed unless it can be, Verhaltens can be completed unless what can thus be felt. Des Bestatbaren has closeness of a very special kind, but this does not mean that touching, Berührung, and the hardness which makes itself known in touching consist ontologically in different velocities of two corporeal things. Hardness and resistance do not show themselves at all unless an entity has the kind of being which Dasein, or at least something living, possesses. Thus, Descartes' discussion of possible kinds of access to entities within the world is dominated by an idea of being which has been gathered from a definite realm of these entities themselves. The idea of being as permanent presence at hand not only gives Descartes a motive for identifying entities within the world with the world in general, and for providing so extreme a definition of their being, it also keeps him from bringing Dasein's ways of behaving into view in a manner which is ontologically appropriate. But thus the road is completely blocked to seeing the founded character of all sensory and intellective awareness, and to understand these are possibilities of being in the world. All right, this one I'm reading. And it starts with a damn it. All you hear is placenta. That's all you would hear, Slick, isn't it? What am I listening to? Well, I've been playing Gohira during the breaks. Are you starting from jump and perhaps on 2x speed, or did you just jump right in? Damit ist wollens der Weg dazu welekt gar auch noch den fienden Charakter sinnlichen und Verstand des Maßigen verhemmen so sehen und sei als eine Möglichkeit des in der Weltseins zu verstehen, while we have construed the pronoun psi as referring to two kinds of awareness, which have just been mentioned, it would be grammatically more plausible to interpret it as referring either to Dasein's ways of behaving or to the idea of being as permanent present at hand. I think I'm live. Don't let me distract. Well, I'm live. You're saying you're live, but what are you live streaming my live stream and thus chit-chatting in my live stream? I'm here trying to get here. All right, I'm not going to let you do this to me right now, Dissident Jones. DJ. Anyway, on the contrary, he takes the being of Dasein, to whose basic constitution being in the world belongs, in the very same way as he takes the being of the res extensa, namely as substance. Right? Okay, so what he's saying is that Descartes, his Dasein is existing in the substantive, right? And so, which he thinks is outright incorrect, as he has made the point that Dasein is very transcendent of mere physical substance. But with this criticism, have we not fobbed off on Descartes, a task altogether beyond his horizon, and then gone on to demonstrate that he has failed to solve it? If Descartes does not know the phenomenon of the world, and thus knows no such thing as within the worldness, how can he identify the world itself with certain entities within the world and the being which they possess? In controversy over principle, one must not only attach oneself to these which can be grasped doxographically, one must also derive one's orientation from the objective tendency of the problematic, even if it does not go beyond a rather ordinary way of taking things. In his doctrine of the res cogitans and the res extensa, Descartes not only wants to formulate the problem of the I and the world, he claims to have solved it in a radical manner. His Meditations makes this plain. See especially Meditations 1 and 6. By taking his basic ontological orientation from traditional sources and not subjecting it to positive criticism, he has made it impossible to lay bare any primordial ontological problematic of Dasein, right? And even though Dasein's his term that he's made up, it's understood that it means something that wasn't a term in the past, but you could explain in words at that time, right? Which is why it is fair to make these criticisms, because Descartes couldn't have come to Cartesian thought without ripping apart the other side of the equation in the first place. Okay, these are regards doxographically. One must also derive one's orientation, problematic, even if it does not go beyond a rather ordinary ways of things. In his doctrine of the res cogitans and the res extensa, Descartes not only wants to formulate the problem of the I and the world, he claims to have solved it in a radical manner. So by taking his basic ontological orientation from traditional sources. Wait, did I read this whole thing or just the end of the sentence? I'm sorry, I got so into it. Okay, the ontological problem. This has inevitably obstructed his view of the phenomenon of the world and has made it possible for the ontology of the world to be compressed into that of certain entities within the world. The foregoing discussion should have proved this. One might retort, however, that even if in point of fact both the problem of the world and the being of the entities encountered environmentally as closest to us remain concealed, Descartes has still laid the basis for characterizing ontologically that entity within the world upon which, in its very being, every other entity is founded. Material nature, this would be the fundamental stratum upon which all the other strata of actuality within the world are built up. The extended thing as such would serve in the first instance as the ground for those definite characters which show themselves to be sure as qualities, but which at bottom are quantitative modifications of the modes of the extensio itself. These qualities, which are themselves reducible, would provide the footing for such specific qualities as beautiful, ugly, in keeping, not in keeping, useful, useless. If one is oriented primarily by thinghood, these latter qualities must be taken as non-quantifiable value predicates by which what is in the first instance just a material thing gets stamped as something good. But with this stratification, we come to those entities which we have characterized ontologically as equipment ready to hand. The Cartesian analysis of the world would thus enable us for the first time to build up securely the structure of what is proximately ready to hand. All it takes is to round out the thing of nature until it becomes a full-fledged thing of use, and this is easily done. All right, let me see here. Let me take a look at how much is left to go. All right, a couple of pages here. All right, I'm going to see what time it is by the end of this page, and then either by the end of this page or the end of the next page, I'm going to take one more break, and then we'll be able to wrap it up in the last segment. But quite apart from the specific problem of the world itself, can the being of what we encounter proximally within the world be reached ontologically by this procedure? When we speak of material thinghood, have we not tacitly posited a kind of being, the constant presence at hand? Have we not tacitly posited a kind of being, the constant presence at hand of things, which is so far from having been rounded out ontologically by subsequently endowing entities with value predicates, that these value characters themselves are rather just ontical characteristics of those entities which have the kind of being possessed by things? Adding on value predicates cannot tell us anything at all new about the being of goods, but would merely presuppose again that goods have pure presence at hand as their kind of being. Values would then be determinate characteristics which a thing possesses, and they would be present at hand. They would have their sole ultimate ontological source in our previously laying down the actuality of things as the fundamental stratum. All right, this is making a certain amount of sense to me, right? And it's getting into the issue of personal value, as where we can ultimately be talking about other people in many respects in juxtaposition to us, right? And Heidegger's already gone into some of the, some of the things where it's just like, I'm not trying to dehumanize people, but we have to start thinking about people for the sake of just the experience of all the things existential to us as more akin to all the other objects in your life, right? To objectify them in that particular respect, right? So this is making a criticism of the Cartesian way of this kind of framing mechanism, because it's leaving out some critical stuff, because it's working in this math and substance realm, which is very much not where Heidegger is going with the conceptions of being and time. All right. All right. Let's see here. Values would then be determinate characteristics a thing possesses. Okay, I read that already. But even pre-phenomenological experience shows that in an entity which is supposedly a thing, there is something that will not become fully intelligible through thinghood alone. Thus, the being of things has to be rounded out. What then does the being of values or their validity, Geltung, which Lotz took as a mode of affirmation, really amount to ontologically? And what does it signify ontologically for things to be invested with values in this way? As long as these matters remain obscure, to reconstruct the thing of use in terms of the thing of nature is an ontologically questionable undertaking, even if one disregards the way in which the problematic has been perverted in principle. And if we are to reconstruct this thing of use, which supposedly comes to us in the first instance with its skin off, does not this always require that we previously take a positive look at the phenomenon whose totality such a reconstruction is to restore? But if we have not given a proper explanation beforehand of its own most state of being, are we not building our reconstruction without a plan? Inasmuch as this reconstruction and rounding out of the traditional ontology of the world results in our readiness to hand of equipment and the totality of involvement, it seems as if the being of those entities has, in fact, been clarified, or has at least become a problem. But by taking extensio as proprietas, Descartes can hardly reach the being of substance, and by taking refuge in value characterization, which is Verklichten, Beschaffenheiten, we are just as far from even catching a glimpse of being as readiness to hand, let alone permitting it to become an ontological theme. Descartes has narrowed down the question of the world to that of things of nature, Naturdanlichkeit, as those entities within the world which are proximally accessible. He has confirmed the opinion that to know an entity in what is supposedly the most rigorous ontical manner is our only possible access to the primary being of the entity which such knowledge reveals. But at the same time, we must have the insight to see that in principle, the roundings out of the thing ontology also operates on the same dogmatic basis as that which Descartes has adopted. We have already intimated in section 14 that passing over the world and those entities which we proximally encounter is not accidental, not an oversight which it would be simple to correct, but that it is grounded in a kind of being which belongs essentially to Dasein itself. When our analytic of Dasein has given some transparency to those main structures of Dasein, which are of the most importance in the framework of this problematic, and when we have assigned Zegweisen to the concept of being in general, the horizon within which its intelligibility becomes possible, so that readiness to hand and presence at hand also become primordially intelligible ontologically for the first time. Only then can our critique of the Cartesian ontology of the world, an ontology which in principle is still the usual one today, come philosophically into its own. And you know, I do think that we might be kind of crossing a certain threshold, because, like, you know, when we're talking about consciousness and waking up, getting into spirituality and metaphysics, you have to transcend Cartesian foundations, right? You almost have to, like, just do away with Cartesianism almost altogether. Cartesianism being almost, you know, the baseline for at least being functional in the matrix. And functional also means with the possibility of discovering how to get out of the matrix, because at least you understand the matrix as it works without knowing that you're within a matrix, etc., right? But the whole reason why simulation theory has been pondered is because matrix allegories have been pondered since the movie came out, and in the pop culture in some serious ways and some infantile ways, a lot of infantile ways, and have led people, you know, to have just enough existential thoughts going on in their head to make a serious public discussion of the concept that we're in a simulation a thing. And it's important to, you know, like people aren't going to get out of the matrix unless they get out of the simulation first, right? And you don't get out of the matrix, but you, because you're supposed to be here, and not because of some demiurgic hive mind supercomputer. It's not. That's here, but that's not what the matrix is for or made by. It's just a big annoying parasite that it can't shake off unless the mind virus severs its strength, right? It's not an egregore, but it's got egregoric type of powers as an archon. A little complicated. It all makes sense the more experiential you get with it and knowing the difference of what's not it. Thus, like knowing the difference between what is in the simulation, what is out of the simulation, yet still in the matrix. Yeah. Anyway. Let's see. I already read that. Philosophically, Dogmatic Descartes has adopted. We have already intimated. Well, actually, yeah, I'm going to finish the page. We have already intimated on section 14 that passing over the world and those entities which we proximately encounter is not accidental, not an oversight which it would be simple to correct, but that it is grounded in a kind of being which belongs essentially to Dasein itself. When our analytic of Dasein has given some transparency to those main structures of Dasein, which are of the most importance in the framework of this problematic, and when we have assigned Zuwesen to the concept of being in general, the horizon within which its intelligibility becomes possible, so that readiness to hand and presence at hand also become primordially intelligible ontologically for the first time. Only then can our critique of the Cartesian ontology, the world, an ontology which in principle is still the usual one today, come philosophically into its own. To do this, we must show several things. See Part 1, Division 3. That division has never been published. Has never been published or never been published before. But anyway, why was the phenomenon of the world... Oh, you know what? No, I think he's right, because I was wondering... Yeah, you see, you don't see it on my end, but like I've got the quick tabs on the left side of my PDF system, and it gives me Division 1, Division 2, and then it ends at Division 2. So I have to find out if Division 3 has been published somewhere. We'll have to figure that out, right? Like, this is the most complete works one can look for, can ask for. This was also published way back in the day. Things may have changed. So, why was the phenomenon of the world passed over at the beginning on the ontological tradition, which has been decisive for us, explicitly in the case of Parmenides? And why has this passing over kept constantly recurring? Why is it that instead of the phenomenon thus passed over, entities within the world have intervened as an ontological theme? Let's see. So, wherein springt für das übersprungene Phänomenon das interwelket Seiende als ontologisches Theme ein? The verbal play on the überspringen, or Passover, and the einspringen, the intervene or serve as a deputy, is lost in translation. On einspringen, see our notes. So anyway, why are these entities found in the first instance in nature? Why has recourse been taken to the phenomenon of value when it has seemed necessary to round out such an ontology of the world? All right, and then we're going to start at the top of page 134 when we get back from a little break. Let's not delay. Bang.
New at.
Shut up. There we go.
Wouldn't it be both?
Go away. It's not what I wanted to hit. All right. Okay. So we're just getting to the... Well, no, that won't be necessary because we should be done after all of this. All right. Bang. In the answer, I think we're starting right at the top, right? Yeah, top of the page. Top of the page. That's what I had said. Pull you guys up right here. Here we go. In the answer to these questions, a positive understanding of the problematic of the world will be reached for the first time. The sources of our failure to recognize it will be exhibited, and the ground for rejecting the traditional ontology of the world will have been demonstrated. The world and Dasein and entities within the world are the ontologically constitutive states which are closest to us, but we have no guarantee that we can achieve the basis for meeting up with these as phenomena by the seemingly obvious procedure of starting with the things of the world, still less by taking our orientation from what is supposedly the most rigorous knowledge of entities. Our observation on Descartes should have brought us this insight. But if we recall that spatiality is manifestly one of the constituents of entities within the world, then in the end, the Cartesian analysis of the world can still be rescued. When Descartes was so radical as to set up the extensio as the praesuppositum, the praesuppositum of, hold on a minute. The presuppositum, which sounds like the presupposition. I wonder if it means the same thing. For every definite characteristic of the res corporea, he prepared the way for the understanding of something a priori whose content Kant was to establish with greater penetration. Within certain limits, the analysis of the extensio remains independent of his neglecting to provide an explicit interpretation for the being of extended entities. There is some phenomenal justification for regarding the extensio as a basic characteristic of the world, even if by recourse of this neither the spatiality of the world nor that of the entities we encounter in our environment, a spatiality which is proximally discovered, nor even that of Dasein itself can be conceived ontologically. C. The aroundness of the environment and Dasein's spatiality. In connection with our first preliminary sketch of being in, we had to contrast Dasein with a way of being in space, which we call insideness, the Inwendigkeit. This expression means that an entity which is itself extended is closed round, the umschlossen, by the extended boundaries of something that is likewise extended, the entity inside, das Inwendigsein, and that which closes itself round are both present at hand in space. Right, this is when I was talking about the Dasein of my room. A few episodes back I was talking about that, right? Where my room is the world present at hand. Nothing else exists. My car doesn't exist. Upstairs doesn't exist. That room where the door is closed doesn't exist. Only the door, the portal to the possibilities, where there is a cat that is alive and dead because we don't know if it's tipped over the cyanide capsule. Right? Schrodinger was a psycho. Like Schrode, my man, you don't have to kill the cat to make a point. I want to kill the cat. What do you mean you want to kill a cat? Like, Schrodinger was a psychopath, and we have to fucking cite his work. Dude, you didn't have to go to the extreme of the possibility of a cat accidentally killing its fucking self. You fucking psycho. You horrible fucking human being. Fuck you that I have to reference you and your goddamn cat that we all love more than you do. Fuck you, Schrodinger. Fuck you hard. I don't even like thinking about it. Just like I don't like Thomas Edison electrocuting fucking elephants. And the elephant had it coming. No, fuck you. That elephant was a slave rebelling as his life dictates properly. Because you couldn't let him go unless you let him go from this very world. Instead of letting him free. You resentful schmucks. Anyway. Sorry, I had to get that out. I felt like I needed to high horse it. I needed to get on my soapbox and rant as such. Because all these people that we fucking love, all of them did terrible experiments to prove their shit, and we still fucking love them. You know, it's you gloss it over. Don't mind the dead elephant. Thomas Edison was the man. He was awesome. Don't mind the dead elephant. Congress wants to put people in chairs, and they may not have even done it because we're leaving it up to a democratic decision to kill them. Yeah, I think I care about your fucking elephant. Anyway. Yeah, even if we deny that Dasein has any such insideness in a spatial receptacle, this does not, in principle, exclude it from having any spatiality at all, but merely keeps open the way for seeing the kind of spatiality which is constitutive for Dasein. This must now be set forth, but inasmuch as an entity within the world is likewise in space, its spatiality will have an ontological connection with the world. We must therefore determine in what sense space is a constituent for that world which has in turn been characterized as an item in the structure of being in the world. In particular, we must show how the roundness of the environment, the specific spatiality of entities encountered in the environment, is founded upon the worldhood of the world, while contrariwise, the world on its part is not present at hand in space. Our study of Dasein's spatiality and the way in which the world is spatially determined will take its departure from an analysis of what is ready to hand in space within the world. We shall consider three topics. 1. The spatiality of the ready-to-hand within the world, the spatiality of being in the world, and space and the spatiality of Dasein. And that third one, that's going to be very, very interesting, as I've been kind of extrapolating that meaning through the conversation as at hand, right? And so next session, we're going to hit 22, spatiality of the ready-to-hand within the world. But yet still, my argument stands for how, like, things are in the world, right? Like, if I told you I needed a set piece designed for a live theatrical play, and you had to make an executive office for a global corporation as the scene, right? So this is a big corporation, right? So my stage presence, there isn't a big corporation that demands this office. There is a story in my head with a big corporation, by my definition, in that story, that an office needs to be manifested in order to tell that story with actors on a stage, right? And so do I have a big enough stage to look like the appropriate size office for the section of the office that is for the play, because the fourth wall will be the audience. So there's a spatiality variable of the distance between different members of the audience and the depth of the auditorium. The audience and the auditorium. You understand, right? And so where would you imagine the dimensions of the fourth wall in respect to the rest of the set is, right? You know, how much space do my characters have to walk around? You know, how big is the desk? Does the desk have to be um, a normal shaped desk, or can I use an optical illusion to create more space as long as the audience sees the executive room and it makes sense in their mind that, yeah, big global corporation which got all that stuff going on, yeah, that office would be about that big, be about holding that many board members with all those empty chairs, even though the scene only required 3 actors for, 15 minutes. Something like this, right? And so you have to think about Dasein in your design of the office. That's what logically makes sense to me. So anyway, everybody, thank you so much. I'm going to run us through the closing screen so you have time to say goodbye and anything else. You guys know how to hit me up. If you want to get a tarot and rune reading, it's zerilath@yahoo.com, and we will make an arrangement. Zoom is an excellent idea. I have started paying for Zoom, and so I hope that I can get some more readings, because I may want to cancel my monthly subscription if I'm not getting much traffic in, and I only need Zoom if there's other people involved. Otherwise, I got my software locally, and I'm happy operating on Streamlabs OBS flying solo, you know what I mean? All right, guys. I will catch you later.